Welcome to another episode of Elizabeth and Mary Foundation. Today I've got MONIKA Phillips, a very lovely lady who is one of my very close people, someone who's very close to my heart. She's come to the show today and we're just going to go through her awesome story. MONIKA, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks for having me. Just to kick off, maybe I should just give a brief background of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like Carol said, we met through a prayer group, and it was like a blessing in disguise, and I shared my story with Carol, and this is what I'm about to share with everybody else. So I'm originally from Swaziland. I'm born and bred in Swaziland, born out of mixed race parents. My mother was a Sotho woman, my dad was English. We're 5 siblings, and we came to South Africa many years ago during the apartheid time, which was a very difficult time. And because of apartheid, we were split as siblings. We couldn't live with my dad at the time, and we were sent to an orphanage, and that's where I grew up. My sister and I, we're 2 sisters, and we stayed in the girls' home, and my 3 brothers stayed in the boys' home. My father's always been a constant parent in terms of always visiting us, but somehow along the lines, my dad and my mom split up. I think it was unbearable for my mother not being able to live in one house as a family, and she sort of like just disappeared. And my dad, we basically grew up just with my dad in the orphanage home. I think the journey was tough, only realizing it now as an adult, but during my growing up years, I've learned to be a very tough, independent individual. Our school, we went to school outside the orphanage, and that's where I met young people like myself, living a different life. And eventually when I matriculated, it was time to leave the orphanage, and my dad stayed in town at the time. And we lived with my dad, my brother and I, my eldest brother and I, and the rest of the siblings remained because that was how the law was, that they had to stay at the orphanage until they're 18 years old. I started my journey as an adult when I was blessed with a job. I started working. But during that time, I was very naive individual. You can just imagine growing up without a mother, growing up with not in a normal family environment. But thankfully, through the grace of God, that I remained focused, and I got a job, and I was able to actually rent out a flat where my younger siblings could come and visit us during weekends. But it wasn't an easy journey because during that time, there's a lot been happening because my mother wasn't present. It was just my father and us as siblings, and some of the siblings took a wrong turn, got involved in drugs and all sorts of wrong stuff, I would say. But somehow or the other, I remained strong, and I was like the mother in the family, trying to keep everybody together. And as life went on, I met somebody that I eventually got a baby, and that was my first daughter. Very abusive relationship that I went through. No family members to run to, no uncles to go to. And at some point, I just had enough, and I approached my eldest brother at the time, and I said, I've had enough of this, and I need him to help me. I need to get out of this relationship. And it almost cost my brother's life because he went and confronted my daughter's father at the time. And they got into a fight, and my brother, like I say, almost lost his life, but eventually he saved me out of that abusive relationship. I was able to recover and start all over again, got moved to another flat, and I was able to bring my siblings together. But that's where the journey was. Constant uncertainty in life, no real direction, but one thing I can say is that through prayer and just believing God, somehow we pulled through, and faithfully I never became like a drug addict. I never became a prostitute. I thank God for that, because if I see, and I mean I've met other individuals that was also in an orphanage, and the way their lives turned out, I thank God that He kept me on the straight and narrow. And growing up, life was very uncertain, but like I say, having faith in the grace and the blessing of God, I was always privileged to remain focused and lead a healthy life. And after many years of working, I got a phone call from like unknown individual, and it was actually through friends of my brothers that played soccer with him, and somehow they got my number, and they told me that my mother fell ill. She's in hospital, and at the time, because I was so naive, I didn't know South Africa, I didn't know Johannesburg. I only know the town where we stayed in the city center of Johannesburg. My mother was in Baragwana Hospital, so I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know how to get a taxi, and I pleaded with my brother, please. They phoned me, you know, our mother's in hospital, and my brother had that anger towards my mother because he was the eldest, and he felt like my mother deserted us, which I think now he regrets, because in hindsight, there was a reason why she went a separate way and leaving us as children. But nevertheless, eventually decided, okay, he's going to take me to Baragwana because he could speak the Zulu language. And we went to Baragwana and to identify my mother at the mortuary. And when we got there, we told the guy at the mortuary we're looking for Sana Falloon, because that's what we knew, even though our surname was Peters, on my father's surname. And the guy couldn't find somebody of that name, and we said to him, no, it can't be. They phoned us, she died yesterday. And the guy said, but I can't show you, I mean, it's not how the process works. You need to tell me what her name is. My brother thought of a name, like an African name, and still we couldn't, she wasn't on the register. And then eventually my brother spoke to him in the language and explained to him our story and said, this is who we are, where we come from. We don't really know, most probably don't know my mother's real name. And on that basis, the guy sort of empathized with us, and he said, okay. He went inside, and the first lady he pulled out, that was my mother, because then we identified, and that's how we identified my mother. And we could arrange to bury her, give her like a decent burial.
After how many years was this since
this
you last?
Was like, I mean, I was like more than 20 years
since you'd last seen
her. And thankfully we could, even though we cremated her, but we were able to give her a respectable send-off. And that's how we parted with my mother.
Monica, that is such a deep story. It's just such a profound story. It's something that you look at and you realize that most of the times in life we talk about absent fathers, but it is possible for us to have absent mothers. Could you tell us what are the effects of not having a mother? Maybe if you can give me 3 effects that you can say, if you don't have a mother, this will happen to you. If your mother is not a present person in your life, could you just give me 3 things that you think that would most probably affect someone?
I must be honest, obviously growing up you don't realize the importance of having a mother, but in hindsight, in having daughters, I have 2 daughters of my own. What's very important is, as a mother, you must try and build that relationship with your daughter. You need to, as tough as it is, and I think especially nowadays with teenagers, they're very difficult, but you cannot let your daughters or your children like control you. You need to be present at all times in all aspects of their lives, whether it's school, growing up and having boyfriends and that kind of thing, because I find like when I look back, I remember one day one of my managers asked me, because when I explained the same story that I'm speaking about, and he was like so intrigued about it, and the one question he asked me, how did that affect your life? And I said to him at the time, I said, no, it didn't really affect me, but you know, as I grow old, I mean, I'm 53 now, I realized it actually did have an impact because of the decisions that I made. I was very naive. I had no sense of direction. I didn't know the importance of actually going to school and, and what to become, because I didn't have that guidance. As much as my dad was a present dad, his focus was more for providing for us. So we didn't have that close, somebody that you can speak to about now getting your period. I remember when I started getting my period as a young girl, I went to my dad and I said to him, I'm a young girl now. And it was like, I was so excited because all my friends were already young girls. And yeah, so it's growing up through life without a mum. There's a lot of things that you end up learning from peers and other individuals outside of your family, which might not necessarily be the values that your parents would have instilled in you as a young girl.
And young girls go through different seasons in their lives where they need that nurturing from a mother. The same thing with boys, they need nurturing. They need us to nurture them. Fathers are great providers, they're great motivators. But there's something just about having a mom's touch. A mom is very particular and is very detailed. Mothers touch your lives in a way that is so personal that they can begin to open your eyes to certain things. So even when I look at a phase like the phase you're talking about, where a young girl starts getting her menstrual cycle, and for me, it's one of those very important times for a young girl in their life, where a present mother can then stand and say to their daughter, you are coming into womanhood, and it's an opportunity to bless your child, to bless your child's womb, to bless your child, your child, and just speak against diseases of the womb, you know, different kind of things, and just to give them direction and to tell them from a woman's perspective what it will mean when her hormones are raging, and just talk to her about crushes and things like that, so that, as you say, they're not naive. They've heard it before. And even if they do make a decision to act in a certain way, it's not that the mom has not been there to say it, but as a mother, you've been able to go with your daughter through the different stages of life. That warmth, that hugging, that embracing, you know, it's something that many people do not imagine, but it is possible for a person to grow up with no one to hug them, no one to embrace them, no one to kiss them continually and say, I love you, the way moms do, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes no one to just tell you the very hard truth, because moms hardly ever moms hardly ever then hide the real truth from you. Whether you bang the door or not, she'll stand at the door and shout and keep telling you, I'm telling you, you must not wear what you're wearing, you know.
Sure.
Yes, because I'm actually reminded of an event that happened with my daughters at some point, where they were wearing certain clothes. They loved wearing certain short clothes.
Yes,
you know,
revealing.
Very revealing clothes. So I thought to myself, so what do I do with these girls? So there's a street in one of our cities. So I went with them in one of those streets, and there are these women who advertise their bodies and stuff. They were wearing exactly what these girls liked buying. So I just say to them, I'm not here to condemn the ladies who are here, but I want you to see what society sees when you wear what you want to consistently wear. Exactly. So the decision is going to be yours after this. So those are things that a dad would hardly ever take his daughters to see to a street like that.
Yeah.
But a mom could do something that is that radical, just to get their children to understand that, you know, you need to get your identity right, because the way you're portraying yourself at this stage in your life,
this is what
is sending out this kind of message.
No, I fully agree, Carol, because one trick that I've learned as well is, like, because it's very difficult to have those kind of conversations, you need to find a way to bring the message across. And I mean, I use an example like what I currently do with my daughter. I mean, I have my 23-year-old daughter living with me, and because it's sometimes difficult to have certain conversations, you have to find means to bring the message across, because as a parent, you also don't want to ignore when you see danger and you see your child is moving in the wrong direction. So I would always use an example, like I will tell my daughter, you know, one of my friends' daughters, this is what's happening, and what do you think about it? And hopefully in that way, it will trigger that actually this is what she's actually currently doing herself, and hopefully that will tell her like, I'm not comfortable in that kind of behavior.
And as mothers of girls, we are actually in a position to raise daughters as role models.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the challenge is quite great, because sometimes we're actually the example of a wife. Sometimes we're the example of a negotiator. Sometimes we're the example of a confidant. Sometimes we are the example of a friend. As a mother of a daughter, you wear so many caps.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when we're busy with our work, we're busy with ministry, we're busy with other things that we do in the social front, it's easy to forget that there are people at home who need those roles to be filled.
Yeah.
And one thing that you said that I really appreciated, you talked about just the grace of God then bringing you to a place where you could be a woman who can stand and say, I know God, I'm fulfilled today. There's a verse in Psalm 27, verse 10, that says that even if my father and my mother forsake me, the Lord will not forsake me. So I think that's one of those things that God does very well. He's able to step in as a mother. He's able to step in as a father. And he does it in a way that eventually you get to a point and you look back and say, oh, I didn't have a mother, but God sustained me.
Yes.
And so I think that's the position that many are in, who maybe lost their mother to divorce, to death, to different things. And they've grown up not having that nurturing from a mother. There are women in the society, though, who can step in and be mothers to some of these women. What would you say in regard to that? Other women stepping in to be mothers?
No, I think, definitely, like, I mean, it is happening when you look around in your communities where neighbors will step in as mothers where they see there is no mother present, which is by the grace of God, because I think one of my experiences that I always share in everything that I do in life is like, you cannot disconnect yourself from God, because God has created me, and I need to hold on and have faith in God in every challenge that I face in life. I look at my eldest daughter, Carol, and the way I've got two grandkids, and I'm so proud of her, the way she brings up, the way she's so involved as a mother with her children. She has a certain routine, and then you look as the grandmother, I look and I think, sure, I wish I was like that, bringing them up, but circumstances are different. But I think as a role model and as a mother, nobody's perfect. You try and always do your best to give your children the best, to give them the best upbringing.
Yeah, I actually seen something that from what you've said now, talking about how we improve our mothering from generation to generation, because we get more knowledge. We're getting more knowledge. Every generation is getting more knowledge. Our parents did the best they could with the knowledge that they had.
Absolutely.
And we're doing what we can with the knowledge that we have and the knowledge that we're imparting. Our children are going to do better than us, because they will have more knowledge, and they've got these platforms. We're talking about these issues, and they're hearing these things before they even have their children, sometimes before their children are even grown up. So that is quite an opportunity for the next generation, where we see there's hope for a generation to be mothered. And there are times where you come in as a foster parent, or your sister passes away and you become the mother, or your brother passes away, or sometimes in life there are situations where you see someone from the immediate family needs a mother, and you can always step in there as a mother to that person. Monica, I always find your testimony to be such a great and inspiring testimony, and it speaks for itself just how possible it is for God to raise somebody up, and how important it is for a mother to be part of their children's lives, and that it's always good to have those memories together, so that we don't then see each other in a mortuary room, but we're able to walk the journey, and to be able to get to the final destination, knowing that we lived a good life together and we did the best as we could as mothers.
And one of the things, if I must just say in closing, is like, again, when my dad passed away, there's one thing that I realized, and it's strange enough, my father was the only present parent because of circumstances, but one thing that I realized after my father's death is like, it's so important to say I love you. And because I never had the opportunity to tell my dad how much I love him, because he sacrificed so much as a single parent and being a white man in the country with black children, and I mean he never gave up. And I sort of instilled that in myself after my father's death, that I will always tell my daughters, I always have to tell them I love you, because just giving them that reassurance that I am there no matter what. They can do wrong things, I get cross, I say wrong things, and vice versa, but the love will always be there, unconditional love.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's show.